A lot of you out there are having two key problems with Lightning Spear Amazon builds in the end game: survivability and single target DPS. So today I'm bringing you my Evasion ES hybrid build that fixes both those issues. We have well over 70% evasion along with over 2000 ES, 1.5k life and resistance is capped, which means you can do stupid stuff like stand in a tornado or get hit by Jest and actually survive these encounters much easier. The single target DPS is also top notch and we melt map bosses, citadel bosses and pinnacle bosses with ease. And don't worry, the mapping speed is still incredibly fast. Plan a link for the build will be down in the comments below. Let's go over the big changes from my previous setup. So we are now using cast on crit in the setup, which automatically casts Sniper's Mark on enemies when you crit them. This takes away a lot of the pain for bossing because we now don't need to cast Sniper's Mark. It does this automatically whenever you crit, which makes generating frenzy charges really easy even for single targets. This does also work during mapping and adds even more frenzy charge generation to our combat frenzy and electrocute neural overload setup. For bossing, this build requires virtually no change. We keep the exact same gems. All we do is we toggle our auras. We disable combat frenzy and Herald of Thunder, which does nothing for bosses, and we enable Trinity. Trinity is a buff which gives us a further 11% elemental damage on top and helps us to squeeze out even more damage against bosses. With Trinity activated, we do have a huge spirit requirement in the build, 275 or even 295 if you slot in Vitality for more healing. And how do we achieve this? Well, we ditch our Lycosidized shield, which with higher end gear has diminishing returns anyways with the double accuracy it provided, and we now use an Omen Scepter. A Scepter can roll with increased spirit as an affix, and if you aim for 50% plus, which is still quite cheap, I got this for a few exalts for example, it can give a 150 spirit alone. The rest of my spirit comes from the amulet slot. We no longer need spirit on our chest piece, which means we can push for more defensive stats, more evasion and more energy shield on it without breaking the bank, as spirit rolls on chest pieces are expensive. The scepter you want is the Omen Scepter because it provides the skill Malice, which applies critical weakness which further increases critical hit chance against enemies in your presence. The final big change is that we've rejigged our gear around. We've incorporated a ton more energy shield into our gear. Our helmet is pure energy shield, whilst the rest of our gear is hybrid evasion and energy shield. The gloves should also ideally be hybrid, but I've just yet to find gloves rolled as well as this one in hybrid form for a decent price. Some of this gear has very high attribute requirements. We need high dexterity for our level 19 skill gems, high intellect for our helmet and cast on critical gem, and even some strength for our weapon and scepter. So I will be giving some tips throughout the guide as to how we can achieve this without breaking the bank. Due to the massive spirit requirements, we no longer use our companion with haste and hasted auras. And I was previously trying out the row mount, but for endgame, I highly recommend not using the row mount. You will get knocked off the row mount, and it is virtually an instant death if this happens, and at higher levels every death really hurts because that 10% XP penalty takes a while to recompensate for. I've also made some major changes to our skill gems to maximize our damage, so let's go over them. Infused Weapon is one of our Ascendancy skill nodes. We'll constantly be using Infused Weapon for both single target through Stormlance spam and Lightning Spear clearing in mapping as well. So here I've placed Lightning Exposure to lower our enemies' resistances, which will benefit both Lightning Spear and Stormlance. Blind, which will blind enemies on hit, and I'll explain why that's important in a second. Strip Away, which makes Lightning Exposure even better, and Conduction so we can shock enemies easier. For Lightning Spear, remember to quality this gem first to 20% so you can create more bolts on impact. The most important support gem for Lightning Spear is Volt, which creates so many more projectiles when throwing a Lightning Spear after running around. I've also added Innovate, which is a 35% damage buff, which is pretty much up at all times. Fork, which again creates more projectiles, and then I'm using Primal Armament to improve damage by another 25%. And the final support gem I'm using is Perpetual Charge, which gives us a 35% to not use our frenzy charges, but still benefit from it. For our Stormlance, I've optimized this a lot and changed the gems around now, and instead of spamming both Stormlance and Explosive Sphere for single target DPS, we just spam Stormlance, which opens up another skill slot. Here I'm using Overextend, which gives us 30% more critical damage bonus, Lightning Infusion for more lightning damage, Martial Temper so we can really spam those Stormlances, Blindside so our Stormlance has 15% more critical hit chance and deals 15% more critical damage against blinded enemies, which is why we put Blind in the first place onto Infused Weapon. And then I've added Deliberation, which gives us 20% more damage. For Barrage, we have the new Inhibitor Support Gem. This is really important because we don't want to use our Frenzy charges for Barrage itself. This lets the Frenzy charge transfer over into Lightning Spear or Storm Lance, which will benefit much more from it. We also have Premeditation for more damage. We then have Cast on Crit. Again, you want to quality this gem as quickly as possible because it reduces the spirit requirements by another 10 if you get it to 20%, which is going to help spirit requirements by a lot. Remember to keep the level on Cast on Crit as low as your intellect on your setup allows you to be. For me that's level 14, but for you it might be slightly lower. Here put Sniper's Mark, Ingenuity for a lower cooldown, Impetus for more energy generation, and Profusion so we generate 2 charges instead of 1 on bosses. We do not need Profusion on Combat Frenzy for mapping, trust me. We leave Cast on Crit active for mapping, and sometimes it does activate on random mobs and gives you Frenzy charges, so even better. For Herald of Thunder we have Magnified Effect for greater AoE, Electrocute so we can now electrocute enemies, and Neural Overload which marks any nearby enemies which have been hit by Herald of Thunder, so the next time they're hit they're electrocuted. You need both of these support gems, Electrocute and Neural Overload, to generate Frenzy charges. It's absolutely mandatory. For Combat Frenzy itself, we just use the gem now. For the defensive buffs in this build, we're using Wind Dancer, which gives us more evasion. Here we're using Pin as our support gem and Culling Strike. We've added on 2 more support gems, Ghost Dance, which now that we're using energy shields gives us so much more survivability. Every time we're hit and we have a charge up of this, we gain back 5% of our evasion rating to energy shield. Again, you should quality this up to 20% because then it goes up to 7% of our evasion rating. 7% of 8,300 evasion is over 560 energy shield given back to us every time we get hit. It's nuts. I'm then also using the buff Trinity, which gives us 11% more damage on bosses because we're applying lightning damage. Again, qualitying this gem makes the damage go up from 9% to 11% multiplicative increase. For mapping, turn off Trinity and turn on Herald of Thunder and Combat Frenzy, and vice versa for Pinnacle bossing. It's really that simple for switching between Pinnacle bossing and mapping. There's no gem changes, no gear changes, no weapon swaps required. Let's move on to our gear. Let's start off with our weapon. For the endgame, you want a spear which has as high a critical hit chance as possible at base. You want the Sea Glass Spear. The most important stat to look for on your weapon is accuracy. Accuracy is king, even more than physical damage. This is because accuracy is converted to physical damage through this ascendancy node. If you look on Path of Building, I used to have this spear right here, which had so much more physical damage. Look at that 216% increased phys damage roll. It even had a little bit of accuracy on top, and look, when I switch to that spear, it has worse damage than the Sea Glass Spear, which has so much accuracy on it. So yeah, look for a Sea Glass Spear with a ton of accuracy. Then, if you can afford it, you can add some more physical damage to it, critical hit chance, and critical damage bonus. You want to socket it with Greater Vision runes, which give more damage through accuracy than actual physical damage runes. Our offhand is the Omen Scepter, which you want as high an increased spirit roll on as possible. I'd recommend at least 50%. The affixes, which provide stats to allies, don't work for yourself, so all of those are useless for the build. Instead, you then want to look for intellect on your Omen Scepter and maximum mana. If you're struggling with attribute requirements in the build, then you can also look for reduced attribute requirements as a role itself. This can help out massively with the build. The 2 high intellect pieces in the build are your Scepter and your helmet, so you can find reduced attribute requirements on those pieces. Remember, Cast on Crit, you can just use a lower level gem if you're struggling with the intellect requirement. Our rings are providing us with more damage. You want to ideally look for emerald rings which have an accuracy implicit. Then look for good flat damage rolls, especially for physical and lightning. You can even add in even more accuracy on top and resistances. Rings can also roll for stats, so look for intellect primarily or dexterity. Remember, if you roll any dex on your gear, you can switch your passive tree dexterity to intellect to compensate. Squeeze in rarity wherever possible. You want to aim for around 100% rarity on your gear, which scales multiplicatively with map modifier rarity. Gear rarity is something that people really neglect for the endgame, so try and squeeze some into your gear. You'll notice a massive improvement in drops, and rings, you should ideally aim for at least 20% on each ring. For your amulet, you want spirit, you need 40 plus here ideally, and then accuracy rating, energy shield, resistances, and rarity. I've anointed it with overwhelming strike for more critical damage and hit chance. If you want a defensive anoint, you can go for subterfuge mask, because in this build we use a pure ES helmet. Again, you can look for more intellect or dexterity in your amulets. For your helmet, you use a pure energy shield helmet. You want accuracy here, resistances, and as high an energy shield roll as possible, along with some rarity. If you're struggling with the intellect requirement of your pure energy shield helmet, you can look for a reduced attribute requirement affix here. I was using this helmet, for example, for the longest time, until I squeezed out some more intellect on my gear and could switch to this one. If you're struggling with intellect, even with the reduced attribute requirement roll affix, then you can switch to a hybrid evasion energy shield helmet. But I find that you lose out on a lot of energy shield if you do this. For your chest piece, you want to look for an evasion and energy shield hybrid chest piece. This is because with Spectral Ward, we gain even more ES from the evasion on our chest piece. Look for maximum life and the resistances that you need. There is a chest piece with a 5% movement speed implicit, but that is going to be more expensive. For your gloves, you want good flat damage again, physical and lightning along with a high accuracy rating, and then resistances along with rarity. You want ideally an evasion energy shield hybrid gloves, but you could go for pure evasion or energy shield, depending what you can find a better roll on easier. For your belt, since the new update, you want a belt with 3 charm slots, minimum 2. Here you want maximum life and the resistances that you need to cap them. Ideally you also want 30 plus strength here, which will help you hit the strength requirement on your scepter and on your sea glass spear. The belt is probably the easiest place to look for that extra strength without sacrificing other stats. Then finally your boots, you want an evasion ES hybrid set of boots. Look for as high a movement speed roll as possible along with maximum life and resistances. Again, you can squeeze some rarity in here. For your flasks, you want to make sure they have charges per second as an affix. This will help out in tougher situations. Say if you're in a prolonged boss fight and you've run out of charges, you will still passively regenerate flask charges if you can stall for a bit of time. For charms, the 2 mandatory charms in this build are the Staunching Charm. You don't need the legendary version, the regular version works just fine, which will make you immune to bleeding. Bleed bypasses our energy shield and can drain our health really fast, so you need a method of stopping it. The second charm, which I think is equally mandatory, is the Stone Charm. It stops you from getting stun locked and dying, which happens a lot in Ritual and other certain encounters. For the third charm, you have a choice. You can either use a Thawing Charm to prevent freeze or an Antidote Charm to prevent poison damage. Let's move on to the passive skill tree, starting off with our Ascendancy nodes. The first node you want to get is Elemental Infusion, which will give you the Infused Weapon skill. This will give your attacks another AoE infused blast after you consume a frenzied charge. Then you want Critical Strike. This node is why we stack accuracy. We can now stack accuracy beyond 100% and 25% of that value is added onto our critical hit chance with attacks. Then for your third set of Ascendancy points, you want to get Predatory Instinct, which will help you kill rares whilst mapping easier. Finally, you want Penetrate. This is an amazing node, but it requires a top tier weapon with a massive accuracy roll to really get the most out of it. So for most people, get Predatory Instinct first, unless you have a weapon with over sort of 400-500 accuracy, then get Penetrate first. You'll notice on the passive tree we have made some changes. We've now pathed here and gotten more defensive nodes to get more value out of our evasion and energy shield. Spectral Ward is a must to give us more energy shield from our hybrid chest piece. These nodes down here give us more ES and energy shield, as well as Mindful Awareness over here. Crashing Wave is even more damage because we crit all the time. Then we also have more movement speed and stats with Step Like Mist. A big change is that we have the Keystone Eternal Youth now. This means we can now use our life flasks to heal our energy shield instead of life. This is why it's so important to stop bleed damage, because that bypasses energy shield and we don't have a method of restoring life easily. A lot of the previous nodes remain the same. We have lots of critical damage and critical hit chance across here, here, and up here as well. Next level, I will finish this off with Deadly Force. We have these accuracy nodes down here and we have these spear damage nodes here as well. Our main lightning penetration node is here with Exposed to the Storm and these smaller nodes here, which in total gives us 30% lightning penetration. Remember, we do have exposure and strip away on infused weapon to maximize that penetration. If you can fit in the legendary amulet Beacon of Aziz, you can take out these 3 penetration nodes and place them elsewhere for more damage, because with Beacon of Aziz, you don't need to worry about penetration anymore. A big tip to help out with those stat requirements, get this node here, Proficiency, which gives us 25 dex, and this +8 dex node here, which in total give 33 more dexterity, which will help a ton with your stat requirements. If you don't need these stats because you have incredible gear, then take them away and put them elsewhere for even more damage. So there you have it, my Lightning Spear Javazon build that requires no specific uniques and can absolutely decimate maps and Pinnacle bosses. If you enjoyed what I talked about today, remember to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel as I keep updating this build and others in Dawn of the Hunt. I'm Mr. Ronit, and that's it for today. Peace out, guys.